Hello and welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. My name is Mehmet. I share daily insights about the latest trends in technology while discussing their business benefits and their applications. I also talk about startups, entrepreneurs, and the new products and services they bring to us. Today, I'm very pleased to have with me Dave Sobel, who is joining me from Washington, D.C. in the United States. And Dave is a very, I would say, experienced technology guy. But of course, I will leave it up to him to introduce himself. So Dave, introduce yourself and the services that you offer.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. So I'm Dave Sobel. I am the host of the Business of Tech podcast. It's a daily 5-minute news and analysis show talking about the delivery of IT services. So I always like, for every $1 of Microsoft revenue, there's $8 of services revenue associated with their partners. And I focus on the $8. I come from the space. I ran a services provider myself for about a decade. Was a community guy and Microsoft MVP, wrote a book, launched peer groups in Europe, like all that kind of stuff. And then sold that business, worked for software vendors for about 8 years, sold the first one to AVG. We sold the second one to SolarWinds. And I then started this endeavor to change the way we talked about IT services and the kinds of coverage that it happens. And here I am for 3.5 years later.
Cool. Did you say like 5 minutes every day? Is that right for the podcast?
It is. I aim for 5 minutes every single day.
Okay. So some people told me you are crazy because you decided to do a daily podcast, but I'm happy that I'm not the only one doing this. Although like mine, it's not only 5 minutes, sometimes longer, like especially when I have guests with me. So Dave, can you tell me like what was your, I would say, main motivation to start the podcast?
Well, the podcast came from a view of the media space that deals with IT services that sort of says there's not enough industry expertise covering this space in a way that's actionable for those business owners. I spent a decade doing that business, and I spent another 8 years selling software to it. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how they work. And when I went and look at kind of the media, I always draw this sort of triangle, and I say there's the technology press, right? So The Verge, CNET, the kinds of, and they love Silicon Valley, they love startups, they love venture funds, they love IPOs, they love gadgets. They're kind of like allergic to services. And then you go to the business side and you've got, CNBC and the Wall Street Journal, same kind of rap, right? They like consumer tech, they like IPOs, they like the stock market, they love venture funds. They're like allergic to services firms. And then when I go to I look at the ones that are specifically in this area, in this niche, they're very voice of the vendor, right? They're very focused on the technology vendors that sell to them, not the view of the provider to their customer. And there's kind of like, if you're a traditionalist that comes from the IT channel and IT services, you understand that this technology flows through these services companies. So there's two sides to it. There's the vendor side, the vendor to partner side, and then there's the partner to customer side. And they spend all their time on this side and not enough stuff on this side, the part that actually makes the money. The part that's actually the most important, because if you're not serving your customers' needs on your customers' terms, well, then you're not relevant to them. And I said, well, I could complain about this problem, or I could do something about it.
Cool. Honestly, like this is the same, I would say, motive that drove me also to start a podcast, because especially in my region, there's a lot of business focused podcast. There are a lot of other niche podcasts, but in the technology space and relating that to also the business. So I'm not saying I'm the first one, but also like this is kind of education for customers or for anyone who's interested in tech to know what's going on in the market. Now,
yep.
I told you like MSP is something that personally, it's a business model that I always, wanted to understand more. But you have something special because you work also in the vendor side, as I did as well. So how did you see this difference from between MSP, vendor side, and overall, like your perspective on the IT service industry overall? Like how do you think it was, how it's doing now, and where it is going in the future?
So there's a lot to unpack in that. So I love the core value that I've always loved about what I do, what I've done since day one, is helping customers be effective with technology. Like, I think that's that core statement, that core value is as relevant today as it was 25 years ago when I, that bit is a constant. But what I will also say is that it has gotten both more capable and more complex at the same time. Getting the DeLorean, right? And we go back to the future, and we go back to, the late 90s or the early aughts. And focus as a technology provider was providing the technology. You went from customers generally not having anything to having something, or the very basics, right? Like they had, the basics of hardware and software, and that was enough. And today, you actually generally assume they already have those bits. Like, there's not really any customer now that doesn't have some technology, right? And it's probably much more robust than what we would have talked about 20 and 25 years ago. But more importantly, they can do so much more, right? The cloud enables so much more. You can sign up for cutting edge technologies just with a credit card and a subscription. But all of the needs are also that much more complex. The idea of security 20 years ago was fighting code red and making sure you just weren't down, right? And now it's, complex extortion run by criminal organizations that can, that you need insurance against, that there's compliance, there's legal challenges. There's just so much more complexity. And so I say, like, it's way harder to be in this space than it's ever been before. That doesn't mean that it's not a great space and that it's not, you can make a good living out of it, you can build good businesses in this space. It's just way harder. And there's a lot more you've got to be good at and a lot more risk. And I think we need to have much more nuanced conversations about that.
Cool. And actually, I want to add to what you said about the risks, because I shared a couple of times, whether before I start the podcast or after I started it, that MSPs usually are part of a bigger supply chain. So when it comes to cyber risks, do you see it like something on the rise in addition to the other challenges? Do you think it should be the number one priority to focus on the cybersecurity space for MSPs?
So the answer to this is not as simple as yes or no. Is it the number one? Like, I hate the cybersecurity space. Like, I actively loathe it. It's kind of gross. Like, I don't want to spend my customers' money on cybersecurity. Like, I just don't. It's a bottomless pit you throw money at, and you'll never actually get to quote unquote secure, right? Because every actual nuanced conversation about security is about risk management. And I could throw infinite money I get this and never actually eliminate the risk. Well, that's kind of a horrible problem. Like, it's awful. Now, I'll also then caveat to say, I'm not crazy, right? I'm not like saying like never spend money on security. What I'm just sort of saying is it the top thing? No, the actual top thing is helping customers grow their business. I actually want to spend my time on revenue generating activities for customers. Now, I'm not crazy, and I know that I have to protect that revenue, and I have to make sure that they are not in a position where it's stolen from them or it's taken from them. And so it is an integrated part. But at the same time, I don't even want to say like it's the top priority, the best priority, because it's I wish it went away. I wish it wasn't actually something we did. And I oftentimes push back and I say, I want us as technologists to ask better questions about how we can make this problem actually be harder for the criminals. They shouldn't have it as easy as they do. And we should do things fundamentally to the technology to make it harder for them to be successful.
Well, that's a very interesting, I would say, opinion, which it opened the door to the other question that it brought to my mind very quickly. So I agree with you. Like it's again, it's not about just spending money for the sake of spending money. But do you think, and now I'm not talking about MSPs in general, I'm talking about us people working in technology. Do you think that we are not doing enough awareness? We are not doing enough, like education to customers to instead of just pushing them to put money on maybe something that will not protect them 100%. Where do you think is the gap here?
Well, so the answer is sure, we're not training them enough, right? Like, okay. But actually trying to push the burden all the way out to the user. And I look, again, I'm practical. I'm in the real world, and I would say, yeah, of course, you better be doing a good job training your users, right? Human engineering, and social engineering is the #1 threat to businesses, and you really do need to be doing your bit. But why aren't we having smart conversations about the core technologies themselves? Let me take, for example, SMTP, right? We've had this mail protocol for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
Why don't we have a version that has identity in it? Like, why are you even able to send any old random anonymous email that's spammed and phished? Why do we allow that?
Right.
And anybody's and let me say, it's well, SMTP, it's a standard, it's been around. Yeah, so was SD television, and we got rid of that. So was AM radio, and we got rid of that. Like, there's a long list of old technologies that we replace with new technologies because they are better and do the job better. But oh, heaven forbid, SMTP is sacred and we can't touch it. What?
Yeah.
Like, well, maybe there's a lot of people making money off of the fact that SMTP isn't that great, and maybe that's why we're not actually taking the time to fix it. Why don't we actually ask the disruptive questions of this? I'm not saying this is not an or, this is an and. We should, yes, absolutely be training our users to make sure that they are not victims of social engineering attacks. And we should be creating environments for them that are more secure by actual engineering, and get rid of technologies that do not allow us to do that.
Yeah, that's I have to agree with you, right? Great. Like another thing which is just shifting way from cybersecurity, but overall, like how you're seeing, the speed of technology adoption, because when we talk about MSP usually, and this is why I have like this special care about MSPs, because usually MSPs, they serve like small medium businesses. How do you see this as like important when fast technology adoption for these businesses that might not be be able to get these big tags and all these things? So what's your take on this?
Well, so I mean, 87% of all IT services companies and MSPs are like less than $10 million in revenue, right? And I know I'm looking at that, in particular, that's a very US slanted set of data, but it's a great market to look at. And I'm a big fan of, like, most businesses are small businesses. They really are. Like, they're really, we like to talk about the big businesses because they're interesting and they're an easier story to cover, but most businesses are actually small. I push back a little bit on the idea that the technology isn't available. One of the great things about both the internet and the cloud is that it makes cutting edge technology available to anyone.
Yeah.
You can go get the coolest, greatest stuff just by signing up for a SaaS application. Like, it's really not all that hard anymore. It's customized and available for your own size and speed. Anybody can get Salesforce, for example. Like, it's available for anybody. So I'm not entirely convinced that that's the difference. What I will say is that, yes, we're going a whole lot faster. We're all talking. It's a great time to be talking about it, AI, right? And ChatGPT has taken the world. Let's note that its adoption to users, in a couple of weeks, was the fastest consumer technology adoption in history. Beats everything else. That shows how incredibly available these technologies are. And now we've got statistics where more than 1 in 4 users are actually using it now in their day-to-day job already. It's crazy fast. I mean, I've been saying AI is what we used to call shadow IT on speed. Where it's got the injection of that great drug, and it's just going so fast. Like it's and now you more than ever you need technology advisors working with business people to make sure that they are making the right choices on how they use it. And again, ChatGPT is a great example, right? One of the things that we're learning right now is sure, use it, but people need to understand how to use it, because did you know it's learning, right? Like it's taking those inputs, and if you give it confidential information, it's going to potentially put that in the training model. Perhaps you, the user, don't want to do that, and we need to help users be more effective and learn how to use these technologies in ways that help them, not hurt them.
Yeah, actually, I saw an article, I think 2 days back. A lot of people, they don't know, and they are using it in their working space, right? So they are just, for example, can you advise me how to I do this? And then they putting their company's data over there. And yeah, it's going back to the model. So it's quite scary. Just also, I'm wondering about something, and especially because from that perspective and how this is changing back there in the US. So did you see like some more adoption for getting a help from an MSP during this remote work phase? And now people, they are talking about back to office. So how does the market, at least from that side of the world, is moving nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at what happened, as the pandemic hit and as lockdown hits, technology moved really fast to help businesses be effective, and a lot of businesses were made remote very easily, and they did it with the help of IT services companies and MSPs. Now that genie's out of the bottle. And we're finding that a lot of businesses are now re-examining to understand, how do we be effective with this? Everyone wants a binary answer, right? Everyone wants it's going to be remote. It's going to be from work back in the office. It's like everyone wants an easy binary answer, and the real answer is a lot messier than that. It's actually going to be the yucky middle of humans in the middle figuring out the right way to do it. I live here just outside Washington, D.C., and I'm watching the federal government figure this set of moves out, where they figure out, how much of their people are going to be in, how much of they're going to be out. And you want it to be like easy, like, oh, they're in the office. No, what's actually happening is teams are figuring out the ways to be effective, what makes sense for individual teams, for individual people, for individual organizations. And they're coming up with a messy middle. Some in the office, some out, what's most effective for the task. And what I want people to be looking at is the core principle again. I said it earlier, you want to help businesses be effective with technology. That is finding the best way. And in this case, it's going to be kind of messy. It's going to be about using the technology effective, not 3 days in, 2 days out. That's arbitrary. That isn't an answer. That's just trying to oversimplify it.
Yeah, that's pretty much logical. When I was, you're checking your profile, I figured out that you have wrote a book actually, about virtualization. Is it the only book that you have wrote, or do you have other publications as well?
Only one that I've got out. I might be working on another one, but I have nothing to announce. Yeah, I wrote the one book. When I started using virtualization early in my, in the SMB, in 07, 08, using it in production environments, and found that it was really an effective way. It was a step before cloud. And took that knowledge. One of the things that I did a lot when I was an MSP was heavily involved in community activities and sharing my knowledge. So first I did some classes and I taught people and webinars and such, and then I put it all together into a book. And now I do the kinds of writing I do is much more focused on the daily and the long form pieces that I'm doing on the podcast.
Yeah. Also something maybe I should have asked you at the beginning, but with this fast pace of technologies changing from day to day, like, what are the resources? And this is maybe an advice for people who are going to be watching or listening to us. Like, where do you think they should be looking or putting their attention to stay up to date with the latest technology?
Well, I mean, laugh and go, I've got a podcast for that, but I sort of
can
laugh
listen.
and smile like that's, yeah, you can listen to my show. Businessof.tech is the website. There's a big blue button to subscribe. I also think that one of the things that I focus on heavily is telling my listeners that you need to actually focus on two parts. You need to focus not just on keeping up with the technology, but you need to also be keeping up with what your customers' pain points are. I think a lot about the areas of regulation and legislation, like is what's coming in. You've got to be spending time there. You've got to be spending times on business landscape and business outcomes, understanding the conditions on the ground so you can be effective with it. You need to be actually looking at the kinds of labor trends and the way your employees are working and what matters to them. The number one expense line item for an IT services or MSP is labor. Yet we spend so much time on the technology side and not enough time on the people side. You need to be good at all of those things if you're running this kinds of organization. So I would recommend and say you actually need to be doing a couple of different kinds of things.
Cool. This is my approach, honestly, because I always tell fellow technologists, I would say, that you need to understand the business. I was one of the people, I'm talking about maybe 15 years back. No, like I'm the technology guy. I don't need to care about that. But, of course, I discovered later that I need to understand, because you mentioned something like a few minutes ago about how I can use technology to generate revenue or increase revenue, how I can use technology to streamline a business process, how I can use technology maybe to maybe we are doing good job now, but maybe we can still optimize that, or maybe we can reduce a risk of losing money. So 100% I'm on the same thing. The last question for you, and this is a traditional question I ask everyone, like, what do you advise usually? Because I'm trying to target professionals and I'm trying to target also like business people, technology people, but I'm also trying to give back and give advice for people who are just, starting their way in their professional life. So what do you advise them to know about the IT industry in general, and specifically in the IT service industry specifically?
So for me, I think that the biggest area that I would want to know when I was starting my career is what a big area of opportunity it is to lean into what we just talked about there in terms of the business outcomes versus focusing on the technology. Customers do not care about how shiny it is. What they care about is how effective they are with it and how it makes their lives a little bit better. And so the more you lean into that, the more successful you will be. And in fact, I talked about that sort of tension between, the vendors that you're working with and the customers that you're focused on. Lean as much as you can towards the customer. The rest will follow by doing that. It's easy to fall into the trap of talking about the vendors and the tools and all of that stuff. That is not your most effective use of your time. The most effective use of your time is leaning into your customers.
That's a great advice, I would say. So where listeners and the viewers will be able to find, of course, I will share the links, but if you can, mention that to us, Dave.
Of course. So everything I do is available on the website businessof.tech. There's a big blue subscribe button. If you want to get it on, I'm available as a podcast every single day on the podcast of your choice. You can follow me there. If you prefer video, I've got a YouTube channel, youtube.com/MSP radio. You can find me there. There's a daily digest newsletter version of the show. It comes out as a weekly newsletter. However you like to consume, there's a way to get my information. And again, all of it at businessof.tech.
Thank you very much, Dave. It was really indeed a very interactive and I enjoyed it, honestly. And I will be sharing all the links that Dave just mentioned. Thank you for having, the time for us today, Dave, to share your valuable knowledge with us. I appreciate it. And it's a wrap for today's episode. I hope you will enjoy it. As usual, if you have any feedback, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly, or you can contact me over LinkedIn or Twitter. And until we meet again in the next episode, stay safe. Thank you very much.